I think there's a lot of mystery shrouded behind a cloud of SEO, and a lot of people don't understand what SEO actually is.
You don't put quarters in and get dollars out, right? SEO is more of a long-term game.
Working in the legal profession is like working in dog years.
When it comes to AI, we should lean in the areas where it helps us be more efficient.
So I have a very, very loaded question to ask you. Everything except the law will begin after a brief word from Answering Legal. Visit answeringlegal.com to learn more about our virtual receptionist team.
So I do residential real estate, primarily landlord-tenant. My area of practice is high volume. It's a lot of clients and it's a lot of calls that I get. Before answering legal, I would have to take every single call or know that it was going to a voicemail and likely to another attorney. So it has been crucial for me to have answering legal and to have a live person answering the call and being the first line of contact for a prospective client.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Answering Legal's Everything Except the Law podcast. I am your host, Nick Worker. If this is your first time tuning in, this is the podcast where we share expert advice on all the parts of running a law firm that attorneys weren't exactly trained for back in law school. Now, my guest today joined us for a panel this past year at our Law Firm Summer Reboot event. She really impressed us with her search marketing knowledge, and we knew we had to have her on our podcast for a one-on-one conversation. She currently serves as the SEO Director of Omnizant, a company which offers award-winning law firm web design and SEO for lawyers. Emily Brady joins us now. Welcome, Emily. Thank you so much for being here.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
So, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your experience working in the world of law, the profession of legal?
Yeah, definitely. So, as you mentioned earlier, I'm the director of SEO at Omnizant, and I have been doing search engine optimization and digital marketing for law firms specifically for about 12 years now, which feels like a long time, but in digital marketing years actually feels a lot longer because so much has changed during that time. I actually got my start as a content developer, writing content for legal websites specifically, and then that quickly grew into an interest in search engine optimization, where I can now get my hands dirty with all the fun technical stuff as well. But yeah, that's pretty much my background. Is I've been doing this for a little over a decade, and I love talking about SEO. I really like doing SEO for law firms specifically. It's been such a fun vertical and industry to be in within the SEO industry as a whole. But yeah, that's a quick tour of my background and why I'm excited to be here.
Somebody said to me recently that working in the legal profession is like working in dog years.
I think it becomes exponential if you also layer digital marketing in on that
I
too, because
it,
yeah.
I definitely agree as a digital marketer. So, speaking of digital marketing, what are the legal marketing trends that you'll have a close eye on in 2025?
One thing that I'm really excited, and I get so excited when our clients ask me about this, is AI overviews. So AI is obviously a big topic anyway, because we all have access to ChatGPT and every possible variety of AI writing assistant and whatnot, all AI tools. But what I'm really interested is how our search engine is going to start using AI more and more, not only in the way that we can do SEO and marketing, but also in the way that it's going to change how people interact with search result pages. So one thing that rolled out in May actually was the AI overviews. If you've done any like question-based searches since the summer, you'll probably have seen these results show up where there's like a summary at the top of search results. And gradually over time, those has started to roll out in more legal specific search results as well. So I'm interested to see how that actually impacts SEO strategies going into 2025, because Google's still kind of refining the way that they display those. How are they ranking sites in the AI overviews and whatnot? And I think it's cool because on the surface, it can be a little annoying, right? Because Google's now taking the content that law firms are publishing and kind of reshaping it into its own content and providing an answer, but they're also citing their sources. So it's another opportunity to get visibility on page one, right? So you actually have the opportunity to show up in this overview and then in the traditional search results too. If you're familiar with SEO terminology back in the day, and you still see these sometimes, but Google would have featured snippets, which kind of accomplish the same thing. It would highlight this like one big result at the top. But now that like snippet, that AI overview, actually has many sources in there, which is really cool. Even within the past week and a half, in early November, Google rolled out an update that's even showing a stronger correlation between ranking on page one, showing up in those AI overviews. So I'm really excited to see how that plays out in 2025, and then how it's going to impact like content strategy and whatnot, because I think it's definitely worth thinking about.
I remember a few years ago being really into SEO, and I'm going to date myself, but it used to be the holy grail of SEO was to get an answer box at the top of the at the search results, because it would go above position one, and then you were really there. So that's kind of where I see the AI overviews going, is sort of like that answer box kind of thing where it's like above the search results, but it also does cite its sources. I haven't run into it myself yet. I'm sort of hoping that I do run into it, because that would mean that we're ranking really well within Google. Are there any new actions that you're recommending to law firms to help improve their SEO standing? Like, is this one of them? Like, what's been your recent recommendations?
Thinking in terms of the AI overviews, but then also just how SEO, I think SEO is going to work into the future. There are kind of two answers to this question. One is shape your content strategy around the questions that your clients are asking you. So I, as an SEO, can do keyword research. I can tell you like, hey, here are the topics that people seem to be searching for online. And there are tools that can help me do that. But those tools are accessible to all to competitors as well, right? So like every other law firm is probably going to be writing content about similar things. So I would encourage firms to take a really close look at the types of questions they get during intake. What problems do their potential clients think they need solved, and then start answering those in their content strategy, because that's what people are going to be typing into Google, and that'll kind of hit that sweet spot of there. We know there's search interest for this, but because we had to take this like extra real world step to get there, it is likely that the content being produced for this may not be as good or insightful because it wasn't recommended to many people by a tool. Granted, keyword research is very important. Yes, there are many ways to find those types of long tail search queries online, but you can get that like competitive edge by actually doing your own real world keyword research and shaping your content strategy around that. And I think that will kind of be the secret as well to ranking in AI overviews, right? Because a lot of those show up for those long tail, like FAQ based searches. Aside from that, I think that we will continue to see a really strong emphasis on elements of SEO, like from a strategy perspective, elements of SEO that are harder to control, but things that you can influence. So things like reviews, testimonials, those like third-party votes of confidence that can help add legitimacy to the content, is going to be really important moving into the future as well. There's a concept within SEO that Google actually, it's a framework that they have created that is called EEAT, which basically attempts to summarize is expertise, experience, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness. And it attempts to kind of like create this framework where Google wants to understand not only how good is your content, but also how authoritative and reliable is the source that's publishing it. So from a strategy perspective, like make sure you're covering the right topics, but also make sure that Google can tell that you are a source, you are an entity or a business or a website that has the authority to talk about these things too. So that can look like getting earned media mentions, like being interviewed in the news, having newsworthy case results, all those types of things is what that looks like tangibly, I would say. But that's something that I think is going to be important moving into 2025, because now we have the opportunity to have our content show up more on page one, but we also all have access to ChatGPT to help us write relatively generic content. So like, how do you stand out? Kind of a long answer to a short question, but that's kind of where my head is at looking into the future.
No, very helpful answer to a short question, because I think there's a lot of mystery shrouded behind a cloud of SEO, and a lot of people don't understand what SEO actually is, or what SEO actually does. Like, I can summarize SEO in like, it's not just content marketing, but it's also it's on-page optimization, it's backlinks, it's expertise, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness. It's all of these things. So I think it's really easy to get lost. And you did a good job explaining of of like what you're actually recommending to law firms to help improve their actual SEO understanding. But I'm curious what some of the bigger misunderstandings that you run into with law firms are when it comes to SEO. Like what do law firms not understand about SEO that they should that you can clarify?
Again, a couple answers to this question because it's a really interesting topic. But I think that my initial, like off the top of my head, the first thing that comes to mind is actually based on Google's misunderstanding of law firms, which kind of trickles down to a way that, law firms and attorneys might misunderstand how organic search works. And that is the fact that Google doesn't understand law firms as a local business. That it doesn't understand the way that law firms function, opposed to other types of local businesses like a bakery or a coffee shop. And what I mean by that is law firms are local, right? Like they're based, you can be licensed in specific states, right? It's a local search. If I'm injured in a car accident, I'm going to want an attorney that's close to me, but not in the same capacity that I'm going to be looking for like a dentist or a vet for my dog or a good cup of coffee, right? But from Google's perspective, they are still hyper local businesses. So when it comes to ranking, there is this element of like hyper localization that unfortunately doesn't accommodate law firms in the way that I think it could. Google has gotten a lot more sophisticated over the years. I mean, which is a good thing, right? Like the algorithm is better at understanding who the most relevant search results are. But at the end of the day, Google still views law firms as most relevant when they are near the person searching. So proximity is such a huge factor, but that gets tricky when you have cases. I'm thinking in terms of like, you may have like a really big like medical malpractice case or like mass torts or something like that, where like people from many different geographic areas could be relevant, or law firms that are willing to travel are licensed in many states, those types of things. And I don't think Google has a total grasp on that. So when it comes to like ranking in the maps, for example, you're going to be limited by proximity. And I find that to be challenging sometimes for firms where their business model is based on having access to an audience that may be several counties over or several states over, right? So you kind of have to figure out how to accommodate for that and work around that. Paid ads is obviously one option, but I would hope we get to a place where Google understands the legal industry a bit better so that we don't have to deal with this frustration, right? But I do find that to be something that a lot of law firms, I mean, it's frustrating to me too, right? But that tends to be a point of education pretty often because we'll run up against it a lot where it's like, hey, I'm in a smaller suburb outside of a larger city. All of my clients are in the larger city, like that's where they're located, but Google still views you as more relevant for, searches closer to the suburb. So that's one. I would say that's one. Yeah, honestly, that's probably the biggest one. The second one I would say, as far as just misunderstanding or like not quite grasping everything about SEO, which at the end of the day, my client, it's not their job to understand SEO. Like that's what, that's what I'm here for. But another thing that's a point of clarification that I find myself making a lot is that SEO doesn't function like paid search in the sense that you don't put quarters in and get dollars out, right? SEO is more of a long-term game. But even within that long-term, that marathon, to be the analogy everyone uses, there are a lot of peaks and valleys. There's seasonality that comes into play. There's really volatile algorithm updates. So even on a month-to-month basis, like you can see growth over 6 months to a year. But even within that, you're going to have all these peaks and valleys. So there's a certain level of volatility that comes with it. It can pay you off in dividends in the future, but it can be challenging in the short term because when you're looking at the data, it's like, man, we're just really being tossed about by the winds of Google's algorithm and whatnot, and that can be frustrating. So it doesn't function exactly like paid ads, and paid ads managers are probably gonna. I think that was an incredibly reductive way of describing PPC, which it is, but there is a difference between those two things, right? Where you have a bit more of like a direct investment that's slightly more short term on the paid ad side, whereas SEO, it's going to be long term, and you're going to have some volatility along the way, which can be challenging.
So you kind of alluded to this, but how can law firms measure their SEO results? Like, what should they be tracking? How can they track it?
Yeah. So the answer is it depends, which is like the most common SEO answer to everything. So I'm not going to say it depends, but I would encourage law firms to look at what is most important to them. The vast majority of the time, and the vast majority of law firms I have worked with, that's going to be phone calls, form fills, chats. That's leads. They're winning business, right? So You want to be tracking that. You want to make sure you have call tracking set up so you can know where those calls are coming from. But outside of that, you also want to look farther up the marketing conversion funnel. I like to always start in Google Search Console and just look at impressions and clicks. That's strictly organic traffic, so your SEO traffic, and it's strictly from Google, which tends to be the largest search engine that we're concerned about ranking in. So impressions is going to be basically your visibility. So how often are you actually showing up on Google search for a specific query? And then how often are people clicking on you from that search? And that kind of ties into, you get a little farther down the conversion funnel, right? Like you're showing up, but how far are you showing up? How well are you ranking? So you want to track rankings as well. There are a lot of tools that can do that for you. But I think starting with the top of funnel and understanding that, especially if it's a newer firm or you haven't been doing SEO for too long, looking at those top of funnel metrics to see like, hey, are things trending in the right direction is a place that a lot of law firms are not paying as much attention to, because they tend to be like, you can see rankings more easily if you're Googling yourself and if the phone is ringing, right? So trying to fill in those gaps. If the phone is not yet ringing because you've just launched a campaign, then take a look at some things a little bit more top of funnel. But yeah, impressions, your clicks, your actual rankings for important bottom of funnel keywords, and then also just your lead tracking are going to be things to pay attention to.
So I have a very, very loaded question to ask you because I think this is true of a lot of law firms. And I'm going to say something unpopular. I will say that law firms often go years without updating their website. And there's monthly changes to the Google algorithm, like you said. So what would you say are some of the key updates that law firms need to be making to their website if they haven't touched it in a while? And does it need to be a complete overhaul? Are there updates that they can make? How can they keep up?
Excellent question. Also, one of my favorite, I'm not going to remember the exact word off the top or number off the top of my head. Google updates their algorithm multiple times per day. They published these statistics in 2022, and it was like, if I'm remembering properly, I think it was something like 1,700 times within that year they were refining the algorithm. We only hear about it a couple times a year during their core algorithm updates. So like, yeah, every month, every day, like it's constantly changing, but you'll like see those bigger fluctuations every month. So that's one thing to keep in mind is like, if you haven't touched your website in years, Google has made thousands of iterations to the algorithm trying to refine it and make sure that it's able to show the most relevant search results, which may put you a little bit behind the starting line, right? If you're looking to join that organic race. But I would say one of the most important things to get started on if you haven't really touched your website in a long time is to just make sure, and this is gonna sound so simple, but to make sure that the information is updated and factual. So if you've been publishing blogs at any point, or you have pages that highlight specific practice areas that you do, so whether that be like, if you're criminal defense, for example, you could be referencing outdated laws on there. Make sure stuff is accurate and up to date, because laws change, the algorithm changes, but you have to make sure it's trustworthy content. And I mentioned that specifically because within Google's framework, the EEAT framework I mentioned earlier, which is kind of an advanced SEO concept to bring up for a high level question, but the T in that is trustworthiness. And that literally refers to, is the information factual and does it have the best interest of the reader in mind? So even if the intent of the content is to not be harmful or misleading, if it does have outdated info and someone finds it, that could, that's going to potentially hurt your rankings. Google doesn't want to surface stuff like that. And it's particularly important for law firms specifically, because any content you're producing on a website that is attached to a law firm, it's a legal website, right? Even if you have a disclaimer, you're not providing guidance, specific legal advice. It's still about these topics that fall into this category that Google has defined within this kind of rubric it uses for how it understands relevance in content, which is your money, your life content topics. So anything that could impact your health, well-being, financial well-being, et cetera, is going to fall into this YMYL content topics. And Google looks at those types of pages with a higher level of scrutiny. They say this in their quality rater guidelines, which is, I find, really interesting and also useful information, right? So it means if you have content that's talking about laws, or even content that's talking about divorce, personal injury, criminal defense, all of that could have a significant impact on the reader's life. So you want to make sure it's accurate. And that's going to be the first thing I would suggest. Outside of that, you can look at technical stuff too. There's always page speed. and whatnot. But that's not an easy fix unless you have the technical prowess to do it. But really just making sure the content is accurate and trustworthy and really highlights recent relevant information is something that anyone who has the expertise can do.
I remember when the quality rater guidelines came out, and I sat probably for a week just reading over the quality rater guidelines, and you just reminded me of the YMYL. So I appreciate that. Um, I want to ask you about AI technology because ChatGPT is like the biggest thing. It's the hottest thing since sliced bread, right? What role do you believe AI technology should play in a law firm's marketing game plan?
This is a really good follow-up question to a couple of the previous ones, right? Because I just was talking about like content trustworthiness, et cetera, but we also have tools that allow us to create content a little bit faster. And when I say we, I mean you, me, every law firm that is producing content, every marketing agency that's producing content on behalf of their clients, everyone has access to this. So there's really this environment where everyone has the ability to create a lot of content very quickly that has the potential to be mediocre, right? It could just be like respun information that already exists. So with that in mind, I think that when it comes to AI, we should lean in the areas where it helps us do be more efficient, right? So you can use it to create informational content. You can use it to create like meta titles and descriptions and do some of that on page optimization. I've actually found it to be really useful even for like bigger technical tasks. So this is something that I think most individual lawyers should not have to think about. But whoever's doing their marketing should definitely think about it. Is if you're mapping redirects, for example, with site migrations, you can give ChatGPT a spreadsheet and say, "Hey, help me map the old URLs to the new ones so that I can make sure that I add 301 redirects so that nothing is broken when I launch my new website with a new structure." Those types of things. So finding those opportunities is where I would say we should be using AI. And you can use it to produce content as well. Content is kind of like top of mind for me today. So I keep going back to that as a really good, tangible strategy because I think it's important. But when it comes to using AI for content specifically, just be really judicious about the way that we're leveraging these tools. You never want to just give it a prompt and be like, "Hey, write me 1,200 words on this very important topic," and then post it because ChatGPT, and by that I mean all of the AI assistants, will eventually reach a point if they don't have factual information about something, it'll quote hallucinate and it'll make something up that it thinks is reasonable, but it may not be true. So learn learn how to use it in a way that helps you do the work faster without sacrificing the quality and keeping in mind that there are going to be people out there who are trying to game the system and might be sacrificing quality with it. So it's more important than ever. Like if you want to stand out from the crowd, being the algorithmic crowd, in search results, you got to make sure your content's good. So you want to like train the AI, have a conversation with it, have it write things in bite-sized pieces, and then always go back and have human intervention, fact check, and make sure that you're injecting your own personal perspective because that like EEAT factor, Google wants to know who's writing the content, and your unique perspective is something that no one else can spoof. So that's going to help you have a little bit of an edge up on the competition. Yeah, I hope that answers the question about AI, but that's kind of where my head is at with it is use it for the technical things. It can help you do work faster. It's great at looking at data or even just coming up with like content topic ideas, having a conversation to brainstorm, but don't rely on it. Don't rely on it for things that it could not replace you for, if that makes sense. So until Google can do your job, it shouldn't, or until ChatGPT rather can do your job, you don't want it to be like producing all of your content without any intervention, et cetera. So I think it's a great tool. I think we'll find more exciting ways to use it, especially as the technology evolves as well. But it's definitely something you want to take with a grain of salt too, to make sure that you're not losing touch with the elements of the content that actually set you apart from your competitors.
I couldn't agree with that anymore. And I want to get to this. Before we conclude today, let's put your company Omnizant under the spotlight. What type of experience can law firms expect when working with your agency?
Yeah. So Omnizant has actually been around. We've been around for 17 years or so. We've worked with 2,500 law firms. So we have a really deep understanding of that industry. We also have relationships and partnerships with a lot of local bar associations and whatnot. So one thing that's really important to us is just understanding what does it mean to market law firms ethically online? And that just comes with an understanding of the vertical, right? Like all the things I talked about, those EEAT factors are really top of mind for us, not just from an SEO perspective, but like specifically for law firms. How do we market in a way that is going to be best for Google, but also best for the law firm's prospective clients? So that's really kind of like heart and soul of how we approach our marketing. But that having said that, we also kind of, we've worked with a lot of law firms, but we have a kind of boutique feel in the sense that I have worked at various agencies and have hired people from other agencies. And something that you run into a lot is it's easy to have a lot of clients per SEO specialist, right? And so something that we're like hyper focused on is making sure that every client gets the level of attention and detail that they need. So we try to keep the ratio as low as possible. And that's something that for me as the leader of that team is, I think, so important. So that's really the experience that I hope to create, not only for my employees on the team, but also for our clients too, is you want to make sure that you have that boutique feel, even though you're servicing many clients. Because at the end of the day, like, yeah, ChatGPT can help us do our work, but you really want to have that like human insight and whatnot. So you really do feel like you're working with a boutique agency, and also an agency that truly understands the legal industry and understands what it means to market law firms and do SEO for law firms specifically, all the way from the content side of things to how you're in a position messaging, and then the subverticals within the legal industry, estate planning, criminal defense, all of that. How does that differ from market to market? But yeah, that's kind of a rambling answer, but I do really enjoy Omnizant, and we have a great team. So it's one of those things where we try to create great experience for our clients, but also great results.
I'm a very anecdotal person, and so I'm going to tell you a story. In my circle, in my life, I am known as the digital marketing guy. So a lot of people will always come to me for advice with their business about digital marketing. And recently, I was shown a pitch deck from an SEO company, and I put that in air quotes, that was offering to do all of these, what should I call it? I'll call it content marketing, like, and social media management and like content creation. But SEO is a much more nuanced and technical field than just that. So I appreciate hearing about your agency and the way that you handle things, because I was just shown it was awful. Honestly, it was one of those things where you looked at it and it was like, no, please do not hire this person to your marketing. So if lawyers want to connect with you and your company further, what's the best way for them to do so?
Yeah, so I would recommend going to our website, omnizant.com. That's OMNIZANT.com. And there you can fill out a form to request a quote. We take a really consultancy-based approach to those forms. So even if even if a firm is not interested in moving forward with us, we'll take a look and see like, hey, here's how we could help you. But like, here are the biggest things that we see as opportunities for improvement with your marketing, just right off the bat, like at a glance. So that's going to be the best way to find us. You can find us on our website, fill out that form. We'd be happy to take a quick look, send over a quote, but then also we want it to be helpful, even if you're not immediately looking to change agencies or find a new provider. But yeah, find us online. That's going to be the best place.
Awesome. Well, I'd like to thank Emily Brady for joining me on the show today. And thank you to all of our listeners. We hope you enjoyed this conversation, and we will be back with another episode of Everything Except the Law soon. Be sure to check out previous episodes of our show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and the Answering Legal YouTube channel. Links to everything covered in today's conversation can be found in the description of this episode. We hope to see you next time, everyone.